Well, my name is Nicholas Bell. I'm the chief film critic at IONCINEMA, and it's my great pleasure to be able to speak with Milcho Manchevski today regarding his latest film, Willow, which is the North Macedonian submission for the 93rd Academy Awards in the Best International Feature Film category. It premiered at the Rome Film Festival in 2019 and has since picked up a raft of awards at several other film festivals, including Best Director at Raindance, Best Film at CineQuest, etc. And it's also your fourth time having this distinction being submitted for the Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. Your first film, of course, was Before the Rain, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is the first Macedonian production after the country became a republic. Competed at Venice, won the Golden Lion, many other awards, and was nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, that was I was there with Before the Rain. Yeah.
So the film Willow premiered at Rome back before the world has changed significantly. So you got to experience it with live audiences and their reactions. And as you know, in a perfect world, in a regular world, you'd be in Los Angeles, most likely right now, speaking on the film. How has the continuing release, because it's played at a bunch of film festivals since the pandemic, how has that changed your experience in dealing with the reception of it?
It's really interesting, actually, because as you said, the opening was in Rome. We had a 5-minute standing ovation at the premiere, so you see how people respond to the film. And it was great. It was really nice. It reminded me of Before the Rain, where we had a similar reception in Venice, just a little bit further north. And then the following, I guess it was the following month or a couple of weeks later, we had a theatrical premiere in Macedonia with a similar reaction. Then the film went to a couple of other festivals, played in Tallinn and played in Taipei. And then the pandemic hit. Yeah. And so everything pretty much froze. We all withdrew into our little shells and went back home. And you couldn't really see how people felt while watching the film. You couldn't breathe with them while they're watching it. It was funny with CineQuest. We were scheduled for the second week of the festival in California. It was in March, I believe, and halfway through the festival, at the midpoint, they stopped the festival, and basically everybody went home. 7 months later, they picked up again online, and we were booked to play in the theaters in San Jose. Instead, we played online much later. That's one of the festivals where the film won an award. So it was interesting. I mean, the film was also booked for theatrical release in several European countries, and that was postponed. So a couple of weeks ago, we had the theatrical in Hungary. Looking forward to one in the US. But it's a different world. You know, you don't get to go to the church, to the cinemas, but instead you stay home in front of your little altar. You know?
Yes, yeah, a very private, insular experience.
Yeah, like Marshall McLuhan, I think, said that when you go to the movies, the characters are gods, and when you watch them on TV, they're friends.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I'm familiar with your filmography, so I thought experiencing Willow, of course, I was reminded a lot of the structure of Before the Rain, with 3 different kind of narratives going on that are intersecting, not necessarily in a linear fashion, but very interesting ways. And also going back to themes you've touched upon before, motherhood, as in your 2010 film Mothers. And this is also a return to Macedonia for you. Your last film, Bikini Moon, was a kind of a documentary style narrative. So in many ways, there's a return to things, and I guess I'm curious about the origins of going back to Macedonia and this particular approach to motherhood.
Right. Well, I mean, in a way, I guess I have it both ways. You know, I live and spend a lot of time in New York, and I used to teach here, and I've shot a lot. I went to film school in the States, but then I also spent a lot of time in Macedonia, and just before I did Willow, I was blacklisted in Macedonia by the previous government for almost 10 years, which was an extra, you know, instead of whining about it, I took it as an extra push to do bikini, which I had wanted to do for a while, that experiment with a documentary style narrative, and looking into where truth and fiction overlap and clash and sort of intermingle. And during that period, I shot an experimental film in Cuba, and got to put together a photo exhibition. Then, you know, it came to a point where I could work in Macedonia again, and I'm happy to go back. I'm part of that culture as well as I'm part of New York. And the story I wanted to tell in Willow at first was a diptych. It was 2 parts.
Okay.
And then as I was working on it, it kept evolving into something a little more complex. So unlike Before the Rain, where we the 3 stories are connected in a seemingly in a circle, where the connections are narrative, and that's very, very solid. In Willow, the connections are more a matter of theme, a matter of echoes and contrasts and rhymes. So the first one, the first medieval story, feels more like a separate story, and then as you progress through the second and the third story, you realize how it reflects on those 2, how they're connected, but not necessarily in a direct narrative way. And the second and the third story are connected in yet a different way, because chronologically, the final story picks up at an earlier point and ends at a later point. So there's a lot of playing with rhymes and playing with time in what ultimately I think is still a relatively simple film in terms of how we experience it emotionally.
Yeah, I agree with that. In taking a universal theme like motherhood, but in a way, after it's over, unpacking kind of all the things that you're examining in there, that is not in a simple way. You know, you could of course break it up clearly into the medieval portion being about spirituality and religion, and then science, and then maybe social reform programs, and motherhood underneath those lenses, which is interesting. But yeah, the echoes in each of them are, I'd say, play out a bit more complex. Like there are scenes that, in discussions I've read and reviews I've read about the film, that there's a lot going on in the periphery that seems to, you know, is there purposefully but not discussed in the overarching themes. Like there was the scene with the apple, the sex scene with the apple, it still sticks in my mind. And I really liked the symbolic themes that brought to mind for me, and also the sequence with the taxi driver that's in the hospital at the beginning of the second scene, and he's visited by someone who believes that he's cuckolded him, and had me just going off on a tangent of, you know, re-examining the word cuckold and what that means, and how that is kind of an interesting accent in the background of this as well. As far as casting goes, you said it started off as a diptych, and did you have particular actors in mind? You have quite a few people that you are reworking with. The woman that played the grandmother has been in a couple of your films. your composer, Kirill Jakovsky, if I'm saying his name right, worked on Dust. Did you have all those people in mind, or?
Some of them I did. Radka, obviously, who plays the old woman,
Yes, great.
was a shoo-in. You know, she's a fantastic actress. She's a retired stage actress from Bitola, which surprises a lot of people because she you know, there's all this life on her face. It's not a glamorous. It's not a Hollywood face. No, I love working with actors. That's probably my favorite part, along with writing, and to a degree with editing. So there were a couple people whom I, as you said, worked with before. I wanted to work with them. I think they're fantastic actors. I love the actor's craft. I love when actors understand the part, when they inhabit that person, and then they take him or her to another level and teach me about the characters I wrote. A great actor knows much more about the character they inhabit than I ever could. So there are actors like that whom I've discovered in the past, and like Pepe Mirchevski is another actor whom I've worked with in every single one of my films except for Bikini Moon. And I should have put a picture of him in the film just for continuity's sake. The young actors, just by the nature of the parts, were somebody I either didn't know or knew not enough. So we went through a lengthy casting process, and that's usually, it took about 6 months, I think.
Oh wow!
We went through several rounds. In the first round, you read, you know, the classics, and you just get a sense of the actor's craft. And then you go with a smaller group and a smaller group and smaller group, and eventually, by the time we're done with casting, we've sort of rehearsed good chunks of the film already. Sure. And then we do old school rehearsal when we sit around the table and just read it very, very cold, very plain, very, very simple, and talk about it. Then start rehearsing. Usually takes about 3 weeks. Okay. And once we're done with the rehearsal, usually, you know, a good actor, a great actor, has come up with new things. I've come up with new things. There's some things you change in the script, but a great actor, you know, they have found the truth of the character in each scene, and they should be able to can it, put it in a jar, and save it for the shoot. So when the time comes to unload on the set with the madness that's, you know, the rush to finish in time, the most important aspect of the work is already done. So right. The actors know what they're doing, you know what they're doing, so it's just a matter of like capturing it in the best way on film. I'm extremely happy with the actors in this film. I was just really fortunate. They're extremely talented, and they found the emotional nuances and lighthouses of these characters, and really, you know, took off with them. So it's, you know, they were the tent poles of making this an emotional experience, as it was always meant to be. Yeah.
So this is your 6th narrative feature,
right?
Yeah. Since 1994, and I find it interesting that your works are always a little bit difficult to predict what they're going to be, because
to me too.
Well, this is good, but across like styles of genres, elements of horror and Western, and of course formats and styles, and across cultures, and even within those films there are interesting intersections and disparities. Even used a Hungarian filmmaker, Tamás Robos, for this. For Willow, and I love the medieval part of the film. I like all of it, but the medieval part of the film, and I was so sad when the grandmother's head got bashed in, because I wanted more of her, and I know that she shows up briefly in a sequence in the party too, but the look of the film though is very pronounced and unique, I think, in both contemporary and medieval settings.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the idea was to obviously for the two to reflect on the setting, the look, to reflect the emotional experience and the archetype of the setting of the period, but also to belong to the same film, of course, to be part of the same film. So, I mean, we did a lot of research where we looked at the difference in the palette, the difference in the lighting for the two parts. And Tamas is extremely good. I mean, he's just, a magician with light. Mm. So he did, yeah. I mean, as far as different genres and different, I mean, like the next film is a black comedy, for example, the one I'm preparing now.
It's nice. Okay.
And I think unless there is a challenge, unless there's a game to play in a very disciplined and very, very, in a very hardworking way, why do it? I mean, otherwise you're just doing it for the credit and to pay the rent. So for me, it's always like going into territory where I haven't been before. And of course, I mean, it's still the same filmmaker. It's still the same emotional approach to humanity and to art, but different genres. It's like you said, there was the Western in Dust, and there was basically an old school horror film in Shadows, and then a film where I took fiction and a documentary and put them in the same film, even though the two portions were not about the same event. So they were like completely different. This one is a little more traditional in that sense. It's in terms of form, it's a little more traditional. It was more about the emotions, but it's that fun. I guess it goes back to my film school days, when we were all in love with American avant-garde cinema and underground films, and we were like freaked out by Stan Brakhage and Michael Snow, and all of
That's good though. It's good to hold on to that inspiration that is hard to come by. Perhaps like narratively, Willow could be simple, but it also has a lot of emotional resonance, which, as I think I've already said, motherhood's a universal theme, but I left Willow thinking about how motherhood can also be kind of, for some women, this historical trauma that's passed down about what motherhood's supposed to look like and feel like. And
I mean, it's at the center of our existence, of any society, really. It's like it starts with motherhood and it keeps coming back to it, or parenthood, if you wish. But then, I mean, I was more interested in how the individual and the society meet and have a dialogue or a conflict or a joyous reunion over motherhood. How society wants to control women's bodies and what they do about it, and what do you do when you can't have children, and what is it that adoption brings to the table. And then it's also about loyalty. It's about a couple and how a couple deals with parenthood or the lack thereof, or with adoption. So there were all these different questions and different little narratives and again emotions that we could play with the moment the film begins talking about motherhood. So it was great. It was a lot of fun, and it was easy to write. That's when for me at least, that something is working, when it just like goes like clear water.
Right.
If you're laboring over something, chances are you're just like trying to push a square peg into a round hole.
I can agree with that as well. Not to cut things short, but to kind of wrap things up, I didn't realize that you'd been blacklisted, but in the interim of your Macedonian features, any major differences between filming there with Before the Rain versus Willow that were pronounced?
Well, yeah, I mean, Before the Rain was a long time ago, and that
Yeah.
was the very first co-production in Macedonia. It was the very first time that foreign filmmakers were working on a co-production in Macedonia. I think that Peter Ustinov shot something there, but it wasn't like a co-production. He just came in, shot, and left. Which is funny because there was documentary filmmaking in Macedonia from like starting 1904, 5,
Okay.
like way back. But then flash forward to doing Willow, it was much easier to work with an international crew in a co-production setting. It was also different in that there was no more the threat of war just over the mountain.
Right.
So that made things a little easier. We could insure the film this time, unlike last time. And I don't know. I mean, the technology obviously has changed, and it made it easier. Also, there was more trust by the producers and the financiers in what I was doing.
I'm sure. I mean, you're a trailblazer, so that was the first.
Yeah, on Before the Rain, it was like you had to convince people that you sort of knew what you were doing and stuff. I'll just give you one little example. Like we were shooting in Macedonia and processing our dailies in London. And they were supposed to travel there and come back, and then we see what we've done. Like a week later or so, which is it's difficult because you don't see what you've done. It was like there was no videotape. But there was a series of glitches, and I didn't see any of the dailies that were shot in Macedonia until we were done with the Macedonian portion Before the Rain. So it was only once we moved to London and we sat down, it's like, oh, okay, I'm glad this worked. I'm glad this worked. Now it was completely different. This was a little easier. And from a personal perspective, this was a film that was and that doesn't necessarily reflect on how the film turns out, but this was the most pleasant filming experience.
Okay, which is interesting considering the subject is dramatic. Well, that's excellent. I enjoyed seeing Willow. I'm so happy I got the opportunity to speak with you. I'm happy to hear that you're working on another project. Are you planning on shooting sometime this year or next year?
Well, if things work out, it should be the middle of this year.
Okay.
So far, Macedonia and Denmark are on board.
Okay.
A couple of other pieces that we're still trying to put together. We'll see how the pandemic situation goes, whether we can shoot by the summer. But yeah, I mean, like hopefully shoot this year, maybe even finish it by the end of the year.
Nice. Okay. Well, I will be looking forward to that. Good luck going forward with your the latest opportunity to compete for nomination at the Oscars. And thank you for a very pleasant conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.